Breaka
All right.
boys.
Yeah, Breaker Boy fighters, let's just break holes in every piece of Volcus because
Break
who doesn't love having accessible on literally everything?
break holes right into this conversation. The what's the name of this box again? Cunning and brutal.
Cunning and
Cunning.
brutal, and we're here for the brutal.
Yeah, because the Rekka boys, just the regular warriors. Look, I love my spam. I love my skews. Travis was talking about taking a bunch of breaka boys and they can just break holes in things. So that's like if someone places terrain, you can smash it and just pull it off the board. And if it's like Volcus terrain, you can do a 1 AP action to put a token to make that wall accessible. And now you're just punching holes in things, just running through the field, slamming people with giant hammers. Like, the game is called Warhammer, and they are living up to it.
To be fair, you only have two APL, so breaking the hole and then charging doesn't get you a fight because the team-wide ability is that when you where is it? What is it called?
It's
I don't know
like,
if I'll say the right thing.
yeah, it's
Tanked up. So if you do a shoot or a fight, you get an extra APL. So you do want to be in a position to like hit someone really hard. So it's kind of hard for the Breaka Boy to do anything fun in one activation because you can't backload the APL and have three APL for the opening of a turn to
oh,
like
that would be
break a whole charge and then donk someone in the head.
that breaks my heart
So
a
they
little
are
bit.
good. Was that?
That breaks my heart a little bit. But
Yeah.
you could just like run up to the wall and break it while you only have 2 APL, and then next turn charge, fight, shoot, or like charge, fight, steal the point.
Yeah, because Breaker Boy fighters unfortunately have literally zero ranged options, so they are purely a smash hammer, 4 dice on threes, 5/6 brutal, which is good enough to tango with most things. It's not great against elites with 12 wounds, but if you take the 13 from the equipment, it's not bad. I think
Wait,
overall, both of us think that the cunning and brutal, the brutal side is looking pretty fun with the tanker boys or the wrecker boys looking pretty cool, right?
oh yeah, they look super fun. Hilarious.
And
Yeah, they look hilarious. It's just like it's everything you want out of orcs. It's another like they really nailed the flavor again with this box. Because like both of the teams, like the Ratlings and their flavor, just looks incredibly fun and interesting, and the orcs look super fun and interesting. Another
yeah, the
just
orcs
flavorful
live in
masterpiece.
semi-elite space. The flavor's pretty good, I think. The Rekka points are nice. Like, you gotta hit crits so that you can backload and get all of your shooters going, because the shooters do nothing up front, but 6 dice on fours with the ability to dice fix your fails and the hits with Rekka points, which you only gain from getting natural crits, means that the shooting can be pretty gross. It's just not gonna be gross the first time. So you're really doing gambling parlor stuff at the beginning, and you do have two Rekka bomb squigs to go with that. So if you do have the Brekka Boy punching holes in the walls where suddenly the bomb squig is now making a beeline 7 inches into enemy territory and blowing up, you get two dudes with blast one on the bomb squig. That might actually be good enough. Because you might actually pachinko parlor with 12 to 18 dice into, 3 to 4 Rekka points, which is then enough for everyone else to just slam into your opponent and get all the dice they need.
Yeah, I mean, if you shoot, if you've absolutely stacked your Rekka points and you shoot a 6 dice rocket at like a Space Marine, and then you're just like Rekka points, they're all hits. Because that's how they work, by the way. You like Travis mentioned, when you roll a crit, you remember you can always get a Rekka point if you can roll a crit. Little shout out there.
Whoa, wrong podcast.
Oh, yep, you're right. He's not even here today. Yeah, so you roll crits, you get Rekka points. You can spend the Rekka points in shooting or fighting, or is it just shooting?
It is anytime, I believe. Let me take another look.
Yeah, but you can spend those to upgrade your fails to regular hits. Like they do naturally hit on fives in shooting in the first place. Besides, like the dual wielding pistol rocket pistol guy hits on fours and is ceaseless in the first place. Amazing, love that. But otherwise, you're hitting on fives and then using your Rekka points to get auto hits. So it kind of does seem like you just do a bunch of insanely wild, unreliable shooting while trying to tank incoming hits, and then just have a giant boom once per game that you just like nuke something with 6 rocket hits, And then like that doesn't even care about ignore piercing because it's just like you're out there with your cute little ignore piercing, and then I'm just like, and here's just like 4 dice that you can't do anything about because they just are more than your flavor zone, and here's 12 damage, get wrecked.
Yeah, I think there's some real crazy things you can do, and I'm very excited to play them. So obviously, the coolest model in the box, I think, has got to be the, at least on the Rekka Knob side, or Rekka side, is the Rekka Boss Knob with dual rocket pistols, because we're all about pistoliers, because pistoliers are cool, but what could be cooler than 2 rocket pistoliers?
He's
So he
just
can take 2 rocket pistols, which are 6 dice on 4s, 4/5, range 8, blast 1, and ceaseless. And with one of your attack ploys, you can ramp it up to range 8, blast 2, ceaseless, and severe. Which is just hilarious, especially if you need to get Rekka points, because I can't imagine any easier way to get Rekka points than to blast 2, ceaseless, severe someone, and hit, a couple targets.
yeah, you're very incentivized to just like go out there and go crazy. Yes, I think the rocket pistol guy is good at that. The bomb squigs, like you said, because they're expendable, they just like run out there, chuck a bunch of dice, try to get a couple Rekka points. Yeah, and then like you've got the dude with the fists and the extra armor, and he just like Dragon Ball Z punches people. He's got damage reduction. He hits like an absolute truck in melee. You can with one of the equipment options, you can slow your entire team down to 5-inch movement, but with an extra wound, so 13 instead of 12, which is like, for me, it's an auto take every time. Especially with like the break of boys punching holes in walls and making up for the movement there a little bit. You can set up some non-reciprocal threats.
Yeah, and I think it seems like when we were first reading the rules, we saw 12 wounds and we're like, it's not really enough wounds to really manage the game. But between your equipment choices and your strategic ploys, you can basically play like 16 to 19 wounds, and that range is because you can both ignore injuries once a turn with your equipment with engine oil, and you can heal D3+1 wounds for every engaged operative every turn on a strategic ploy. So if you are just on the brutal side on the third turn, or if you can find a line on the opening of turn 2, you could just start healing D3+1 for 2 turns, and everyone that's still alive ignores injury when it matters, and hopefully has enough wounds with D3+1 and 13 wounds where you break yourself over the 7 wound breakpoint and just don't have injury. Slam into people, 5-6 damage, great. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Brekka Boy Demolisher, the tank hammer, because who doesn't love an anti-tank Warhammer? Because Trench Trade is popping right now, and we've got that in Killteam as well. And I realized while thinking about this model, he's actually an incredible counterpuncher, because if someone charges him, you can always just switch the tank hammer to detonate and just go out swinging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he's got 2 different profiles. One of them is kind of like a normal hammer. It's, what is it, 4/5 or 5/6? Either way, it hits pretty hard.
4 on 3s, 4/5, which is a solid just chop a profile, which is fine, but we don't care about that.
But is it brutal?
It is not brutal, so we sleep on that one.
Geez,
it's good because we'll do it, because reckless temperament means all of it, all the normal and crit damage gets lessened against him, because really his job is to survive after he goes in and kills a dude being trapped in melee, and then your opponent has to now manage this Brekka Boy Demolisher, and on the second turn you kill the guy, and then you switch over to detonate and you nuke a little pile of the board, because detonate is whenever he would deal damage with 4 dice on 3s, lethal 5, limited 1 once detonate, you deal either d6 plus 6 damage or 2d6 plus 6 damage to everybody within an inch of, basically within control range of the target that you're tank hammering.
Yeah, so this is like the actual model. He's got a rocket inside of the head of his hammer. So the detonate mode is just like he hits you and the rocket explodes. And like he's also taking that damage. And and the situation for the 2d6 is if you strike with a crit. So it's like it's 4 attacks. It's lethal 5, and only the first hit does something. It just like explodes the whole room. So with 4 attacks, lethal 5, you have very high odds of doing 2d6 plus 6. So like he fights till he's low on health, and then he just self-destructs in a giant bomb that kills everyone.
Yeah,
pretty wild.
Scary. So He's a pretty cool model. I don't know how good he'll be because he's super high variance, and against Marines, technically even. I guess 2d6 plus 6 is probably enough to kill a Marine some percentage of the time. But he's always going to heavily maim whoever he's touching.
Yeah, I think like the
And against any
statistical
smaller
average is like
teams, he's
13
just
damage.
yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, so pretty scary as long as you get a critical. So between Wog and his normal attacks, you get 5 dice. If you're going in, your chance of hitting the lethal 5 is pretty high. If you're getting attacked, your opponent has a way to parry out before that happens, and you just get a normal hit. So really, he's pretty solid. Send him in, go kill a dude, and then hopefully at the beginning of the next turn, you just suicide charge him. Always try to
Also,
finish the charge around a corner.
with the lethal 5, that's a great way to generate Rekka points as well. Because is it just like
It is only natural 6s that count. So
only natural
I think
6s? And is it retained or like damage that you push through?
For each attack dice of 6 you retain, you gain a Rekka point. So lethal 5 does not count, severe does not count, rending does not count. All of those things are ancillary to actually landing a 6.
Sad face.
Yeah. As far as the ranged option goes, the Tank Buster Rocketeers got some cool choices. Big one being the Pulsa, a once-a-game shot that creates a bubble that slows people down and deals D3 damage per Pulsa point. So you shoot a Pulsa. For every hit that you get, you make the ball bigger and bigger, and then the balloon injures everybody within X range, where X is the number of pulse points you put in, and that X bubble is how many successes you get.
Is it also
To a
XD3
maximum
damage?
of 4. So it's separately inflict D3 damage on each operative with an X, where X is that marker's pulsa points. Oh, so you get 1 D3 damage, but then from that point on, everybody within up to 4, because 4 is the max pulsa points you can get, gets injured basically, and it stacks with injury. So if your opponent is injured and they're in the pulsa bubble, they are moving 4 -2, -2 for all their stats, because it specifically says that it is cumulative with being injured. So
Yeah, I think it's like the only thing we've seen that stacks is like a penalty that stacks with injury.
yeah.
And then a 4-inch radius. So like you're gonna have just a giant bubble in the field. That's like the new temporal nanomine.
And then in the ready step of every strat phase, it drops by 1 pulsa point. So basically, once it gets fired, it's going to sit there, and then it's going to get a little bit smaller every turn. You can also put it on vantage terrain. So on Vulcus, there is the ability to like chuck it on top of a building, and then suddenly people just can't move around.
They're just
the Vulcus
frozen, trapped on top of the building.
yeah, so there's definitely there's some interesting choices there. It doesn't do a ton of damage, so you give up utility, because the other choice is you get a rocket rack, and the rocket rack is 6 dice on 5s, 4/5 blast 2, which can be ramped to blast 3 with our tac op ploy, or tactical ploy. Limited 1 relentless. So giving up 6 dice on 5s, 4/5 blast 2 or 3 with relentless and severe, that is definitely a cost as far as actual output goes, because hitting, as everyone who's played against Star Striders knows, you can avoid blast 2. But you can't really avoid blast 3.
Yeah. Yep. Also, one of the equipment options lets you trade blast altogether to gain piercing instead with drill rockets. Pretty silly.
So the rocket rack, I don't know, like the drill rockets does have some restrictions on what it can be used with. So it's got to be the rocket launcher or the heavy rocket launcher, and neither of those is the rocket rack.
Yeah.
So that would be on the Tank Buster Gunner, which is like the 2 default range options. 6 dice on 4s, 4/5 blast 1 heavy dash is the heavy rocket launcher. So being able to give that pierce 1 and no blast makes it pretty good if you've got Rekka points stacked up. And then the rocket launcher is 6 dice on 5s, 4/5 blast 1 with no heavy restriction. So depending on how many Rekka points you get before you start firing away, that could be a big part of it. And when you do a shoot action, and you shoot another operative that's already been shot, you gain a Rekka point. So you get that after the shoot action is done. So, and that's basically, gunner shoots someone that's already been shot at, either by primary target or secondary targets, you get an extra Rekka point. So the heavy rocket launcher, I suspect, is probably not going to be good, because the team is 6+2. So I suspect that heavy is just going to be too much of a restriction for that team.
Yeah. Yeah, the drill rockets do have potential to do an insane amount of damage. Because 6 dice, if you can push them all to success and you have piercing, that'll just like you could just guarantee a kill against an elite if they're standing in your sights. And there's like they don't even need to roll dice if you just like get all your hits. And like use your record points to get all your hits, and it's piercing, and then they only have 2 dice, then that's like 4 dice definitely going through, and that's 16 damage.
Only in the world where we've removed Pierce ones ignoring and maybe touched Legionary a little bit.
Yeah, and then even in the world where it's still there, that's like 12 damage, and then if you fail any extra dice...
Not against Warp Coven, though. Warp Coven can make it 9 damage. Because they can always dust it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the team looks quite fun. Security, Seek, and Destroy. Basically, just the Orc version of Space Marines. Not as much APL, but if you get them into a scrap and they can keep pushing, they will feel very good. Obviously, the counterplay against them is to not let them get into a scrap. Play around them, play cagey, run away from them. It really makes those wider horde teams with infiltration that much more frustrating as you run away from the Orcs and just pop the bomb squigs.
Yeah.
And the bomb squigs do not count, just like the commando bomb squig. So that seems like just kind of a flat thing that we're gonna come to expect from our expendable operatives. Meanwhile, on the Cunning side, we've got 10 dudes, 11 dudes. I think it's 11 dudes.
Yep, 11
with hairy feet.
Yep, shorties, short kings. But the new version of short kings.
Yeah, honestly, kind of surprised at their wound count. I was kind of expecting them to be like 4 or 5 wounds, but they lost movement. So they're a 5-inch move shooting horde team with 6 wounds. That's kind of like the flat profile, but everybody comes with a silent sniper rifle.
So
they don't come with a silent sniper rifle. They come with
a bunch of them are silent, and then but you can essentially use a strategic ploy to have all of your sniper rifles be situationally silent. And then there's also they have a ploy that lets you essentially flip back to conceal. So they've got all sorts of tools to really be sneaking around. They've got super conceal. They've got the same thing that Deathcore has, where you can trade operatives to get free ploys, but it looks like it could be for the firefight or the strategy ploys. So you could technically bring like 3. You just no, it's up to 3 times. Never mind. So you could bring 8 tiny little sniper hobbits, ratlings, and just have 3 free ploys.
I suspect you'll never do that, though, because I'm pretty sure that 3 Bullgrain are always going to be better than 3 ploys.
Yes.
Because, in one of the bigger surprises, I think, of Killteam design, the Bullgrain and the Ogrins do not cost 2 choices. So it's an 11 model team always. But you can select a Bullgrain or an Ogrin in one of those slots. So there are 3 operatives that are tagged as special, and... actually, it's like the 2 operatives that are tagged as special. So the Bullgrain and the Ogrin are both tagged as you can have up to 3 of them, but you can also only have 1 sniper operative. Oh no, snipers are the defaults. So Bullgrain, Ogrin, and snipers are you can take multi-choice, but
yeah.
Ogrin
so like
you can have up to 3 of.
The basic warrior for this team is a Ratling sniper, and it doesn't have data card abilities, but it's also the only snipers that hit on 2s, where everyone else is like they've got cute abilities and they hit on 3s.
I think the big thing is they also have Dev 3 compared to everyone else's Dev 1. So
there's like a stack of them that have Dev 3, but then there's also a bunch of them that are only Dev 1. So like just the basic warrior snipers do hit like a trillion times harder than everyone else, which is very amusing, and it's got some real skew potential. The trouble is the Dev 3 profile is heavy. It's not like heavy dash only, it's straight up heavy, but you can kind of work around that with the Scarper special rule, the faction rule, which is it's pretty much the same thing as the Mandrake like shadow slide thing, but you do it for free as a faction ability, but you can't do it every activation in a row. It has to be every other. So like let's say a Space Marine runs up and fights one of my Bullgrain out front, then I will Scarper a sniper over to the corner where I can now see this Space Marine that is fighting the Bulgrin, and then I can use a firefight ploy called Sharp Shot or Sharpshooter or something like that, which lets me shoot into melee. So the Bulgrin parries the Space Marine out, and then a little dude just scampers over and then does a sniper shot into the Space Marine. It seems like they've got some real sauce. One of the things we were chatting about, it seems like one of the biggest struggles they're going to have is they're so short. I haven't built one yet, but I should do that and compare it to Volkus. Like, they're so short, they're definitely not going to be able to see over plenty of the walls. So then it'll just be like, what walls will they be able to see over? Yeah.
I think even on some of the vantages, you might be at a position where your head might see over the wall, but if you look down, you will be looking into the wall. So I suspect that there's going to be a lot of situations where even though the Ratlings feel like they should be able to do stuff, they're actually going to be too short to go do things. And it is going to be very sweaty and very lame, but if you let them get shots they're not supposed to, I suspect the Ratlings will feel absolutely broken.
Yeah.
And, commenting on that sequence that Jason just said, Scarper actually requires you to finish out of visibility. So really what you're trying to do is move into a position on the first turn where you can get a shot, and then take the shot, and then Scarper away from the shot at the end.
I think the out of visibility is only if you're within, if you move within 3 inches, you have to be out of visibility, but otherwise you can just dash around.
But it cannot finish that move within 3 inches of an enemy operative unless it's not visible to every enemy operative when it finishes that move.
But the chunk right before that is the within 3 thing. Yeah, we gotta.
You can perform a dash with one friendly, but it cannot finish that move within 3 inches of an enemy operative unless it's not visible. So you can always do the Scarper, but if you want to end within 3 inches of someone, you've got to be fully invisible.
Yeah, so like lurking hard on the other side of a wall. So I think you can use that to line up sniper shots.
Yeah, it looks like that does sound like it. So if I read the entire chunk, I think that makes sense. You always get the dash, but there are some restrictions on where you can end if you're within 3.
But that is amusing because you can get within 3. But yeah, you can only do it once per activation, but every other. Yeah, so if the enemy has 6 activations, that would mean you have, I think, 2, because it also can't be the last activation of the turn, so you would have 2 Scarpers. And if they have like 10 models, then you'd get like 4 or 5, depending on who goes first.
And really, if you're taking 3 Bulgrin, you're only going to have like 8 Ratlings anyway, so generally the amount of Scarpers would make sense, because the Ogrin, they're just there to walk over, stand on a point, and wait for orders. And, let's talk about the Ogrin. I think the Ogrin and the Bulgrin, kind of crazy. Honestly,
I think they're really interesting.
Profiles.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bulgrin is a 4-up save, 16 wounds, kind of slow for doing mission actions, but if there's nothing left on the point after he's stood there for a while, maybe it's fine. Because the Bulgrin's got the better melee defensive profiles. He's got a Power Maul, which is 4 dice on 3s, 4/6 shock, which shock, if everybody remembers, is when you hit with a critical, you knock off one of your opponent's normals. And you're probably always going to take that as the melee weapon, I suspect.
Yeah.
Just because your job as a Bulgrin is to stand on a point and wait for the Ratlings to pick everyone off around you. And if you take a Slab Shield, you've got a 3-up save. But if you take a Brute Shield, you've got double parry. So you take the Slab Shield when you get shot at, and you take the Brute Shield when you need melee defense. And it just seems really hard to shift a 16 wound operative that has, when your opponent's in melee combat, you're basically never going to kill him on the charge. And then you also get shot by a Ratling with Dev 3 in the background.
Yeah, they pretty much can just like set up security on the midline and not let anyone through, and then also just like be bait. There's stuff that synergizes with them, equipment option that makes them crit save on 5s, which is pretty good. And then they have a ploy that if they are wholly within enemy territory and or within 3 inches of an objective, they gain, it's either balanced or ceaseless. I think it's ceaseless. I'd have to look again. But they get just a massive buff to their stats there. Yeah, and then like
balance. The front line assault,
balance, yeah, still pretty good.
Or Ogrin is shooting within, fighting within, or retaliating within your opponent's territory, or within 3 inches of an objective marker, which is where they're gonna live. Its weapons will have balance. So a balanced Bulgrin with double parry is basically just unkillable through almost any number of operatives until he's down to, I think, 6 wounds.
Yeah, and he's really going to be crushing skulls on the way there. The Bulgrin, yeah, is really just going to hold the line. I think the Ogrin is probably going to be better at aggressing into enemies because the shooting hits on 3s instead of 4s, and then the
The bayonet's also pretty solid. 4 dice on 3s, 4, 5 is a perfectly serviceable melee profile. But the important thing is you get the bayonet charge, which is when you finish a charge, you deal D3 plus 1, which is almost always enough to make any 7 or 8 wound operative very much in trouble. Because the floor is 2 damage, which means that against 7 wound operatives, basically any result is good enough to put you in lethal range with balanced. And then against 8 wound operatives, pretty much every result makes it so that you're never going to lose a fight. And on the chances where you just go into someone, stab them, and they die, you've done your whole job. Great.
yeah. Yeah, so the Ogrins are better at line breaking, and the Bulgrins are better at holding the line, and then the snipers are you just put snipers everywhere. They do, like, the thing I like the least about the team is there are 13 data cards, and I think you could run pretty much, like, almost all of them, because you've got 11 operatives, and you could just take, like, unique through the entire thing. That's too much.
Yeah, it's an incredibly interesting team that's very high skill level, but it is unfortunately a 2-box team. Exactly 0 Bulgrin or Ogrin in the box. I think it's a big miss that they didn't include the single-use Ogrin sprue that came with Darktide, because that was a new sprue from what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of like a Space Marine Heroes style, like easy to build, snap it together, it doesn't need glue, it's all a single sprue for a single model. They should have put 1, 2, maybe even 3 in there. I don't know.
Yeah, at least the one, so that players in, because I feel like the inbox balance here is actually pretty poor. So generally, I've been a big fan of all the boxes being like, well, you play it with a friend, you can play it together, and it should work out reasonably well. I don't actually think that the inbox balance here is particularly fun, because the rattlings are just like scurrying around while the wreckers just one-shot you.
But, like, oh yeah, because if you don't have any Ogrins, it is just like, it's kind of unsatisfying if you're an orc and you make it all the way there, and then there's just a ratling, and then you just, like, squeeze him and he pops, and there's a little floof of fur, and then you're like, I want to kill a worthy foe, but no such foe exists.
Like, the rattling's entire game plan is to run away from you, so it just feels like, maybe a little bit too cunning, not enough brutality, and I think if they had given you 1 Ogrin, you could have given yourself 1 centerpiece to go hold a point, and then your opponent can deal with that, and you can react to that. Versus right now, it's like the orcs just sneak up to you at the midline in conceal, and then just blitz you.
Yeah. I don't know. I like it definitely, if you want to play the rattlings at a competitive level, you're going to need like 4 boxes at least, because you're going to want to have like all the specialists for the rattlings. It's probably a good idea to have some extra warriors, and even if you just want a couple extra warriors, that's like a whole extra box. And then like you probably want the Bulgrin and the Ogrin, so you could like go crazy with magnets, because I'm pretty sure 1 box of that is, you get a box and you can build it into either, or you can like magnetize it and go crazy.
The Ogrin box is both. It's Ogrin and Bulgrin with all options for everything. I think it's also kind of unfortunate that if you do want to be competitive with both of these teams, both of these boxes are like multi-box kits. Like the Rekka Boys, you either need magnets or you need to buy a couple extra boxes, because you do want to have the range options and the melee options, so it's not a 1-box team. And then halflings or the rattlings are explicitly not a 1-box team, so I think that is kind of a big miss. Flavor-wise, I think these are great. I'd be remiss if we didn't call out the Rattling Raider, who's got a grappling hook with a very unique mechanic. So you fire the grappling hook, and depending on where you launch it up onto the vantage, you can swing out, X minus 1 inches on the other side, which is just good.
Yeah, and then like the X is like the height of the thing you slingshotted to, so you have this like vertical like triangulate. Yeah, you just like zip around, and he's got like a knife, which is like almost the best melee on the team, and it's 3 attacks on 4, 2, 3.
And of course, the actual best melee on the team, 3 dice on 3s, 35 balance with Brutal.
And he only gets Brutal if he's like hugging heavy cover, but then also if he has a conceal, or he can charge from conceal, and that, what's the other thing? And then like he fights first if you attack him, because he's lying in wait, which is like not horrible. It's like you charge in, and then this tiny little dude stabs you for 5, and then you crush him. Well, and then if he hits you again, he might even do like 8 damage to you, and you're just like this poor little ratling that you thought you were gonna squeeze just did like 8 damage to your big scary space marine, and now all of a sudden this big scary space marine is like, ooh, that hurts a lot, and then he's the guy that you marked for lethal 5, so maybe you critted him twice. Speaking of which, your leader, the Fixer, chooses a single target per turning point that your whole team gets lethal 5 against, and if you have 10 million snipers, that's insane. You're going to be just mulching people what that single targets per turn.
True. They will just absolutely mulch a lot of people. You also get Munitorum contracts, so you get an extra additional equipment, and with the power of your bomber guy, the bomber.
Oh yeah, the bomber can put tripwires that strip people's APL, and can put landmines that do extra damage and can't hurt your own people.
Yeah, 2d3 plus 3 with no ability to hit your allies, whether on triggering or during the explosion. Kind of incredible. You can have an Ogren sitting on a mine, not understanding what's going on. A dude charges him, takes d3 plus 3, and then the Ogren just bops him on the head and he just explodes.
Yeah.
And the Ogren, you know, being the slow-witted fools they are, will have no idea what just happened. So flavor-wise, I actually love both of these teams. I think they did a really good job of kind of landing the flavor of, you know, the Ratlings abusing the Ogren to go do stupid things while the Ratlings keep the line safe because they've got access to security and infiltration. Very, very flavorful, pretty good. And then on the Orc side, just hype to just charge in, break holes and stuff, have missiles explode, just explosions everywhere, D3 plus 1 wounds because the adrenaline's going. And, you know, I think the flavor-wise balance is pretty good. And they don't actually seem necessarily overpowered out of the kit. Because I do think that if you play Ratlings correctly, you're going to have to work around some visibility issues.
They are going to have some visibility issues. I think they are going to be like a little bit of a nightmare because just like all the traps, like good players are going to be really hard to deal with this team. But they do seem really fun.
Horde. The other big thing about them is it might actually be a shooting horde that actually has a chance against elites, because the 3 Ogren or Bulgrin or whatever combination can actually tango with almost any melee operative charging into them. And then the Dev 3 with lethal 5 means that it doesn't matter how much damage mitigation is on the other side or how much piercing mitigation is on the other side. 3 sniper rifles hitting 1 Marine that's trapped in front of a Bulgrin is probably going to be enough to just delete that Marine.
Yeah, and like two of them is enough to maim them. And like with the lethal 5, 2 of them might be enough to kill.
Yep. So it does seem like a team that does have the ability to, where if the Legionary and Warp Coven have no changes whatsoever, still can tango pretty well. And if those things do come down, they're set up in a pretty good spot. And I think flavor-wise, very funny.
Yeah, at the time of recording, there hasn't been any balanced data slate yet. But by the time this comes out, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a balanced data slate. We have no idea. And if like elites are nerfed into the dirt, hopefully it's not totally into the dirt. But I think the Ratlings will be sitting in a really good spot. And actually, I think in the current meta, I think the Rekkas would be a little bit held down by elites. But if they're like tapped down a notch, they'll be right in there and like in a good spot.
Yeah, and you know, honestly, one of the teams that we love to hate on, the Novitiates right now, Rekka Boys, pretty good against them because it doesn't matter how much half damage you take when my flat profile is Brutal 5/6.
Yeah. Yep.
Brutal 5/6 probably with balance anytime that you're going to go in.
Yeah. Yeah, they're just going to slam everyone into the dirt. Looks like a fun team. Yeah, honestly, like when they announced the box, I was like, the orcs seem kind of fun. Ratling's probably not my thing. And then once we like actually saw the rules, I was like, oh man, this is actually really fun. I don't think I would play the Ratlings competitively, but I think I'm going to noodle around with some silly skews. Like, I think I'm probably going to build mostly snipers out of the box and then choose like a couple of specialists. That basically, the dog looks great. Well, we got to shout out the dog a little bit. The dog is like, it's like if you charge, it's like the opposite of the Kroot dog. It's the opposite of the Kroot dog.
Operative on our team by far. 2 APL, 6-inch move, which is 1 more than everyone else. 5 up save, 4 wounds. Just a little itty bitty rattling battle mutt. It cannot do anything fun, so it can't even do pickup, which is actually very funny because it's probably too small to actually pick anything up. It can only do charge, dash, fallback, fight, and reposition. And at 4 dice on threes, 2 4 damage on the bite, not really expecting the poor little battle mutt to do basically anything of note. But, Jason was talking excitedly about early morning, so I'll let him take it away.
Yeah, early warning. If someone moves within 2 or charges you, the dog can activate its ability just like as a reaction, and you can fall back or dash out of the way. So if someone is trying to like run up to within 2 inches of one of your snipers and take a shot at you, the dog does an early warning, and then you just scarper away essentially, and they don't have the shot. And now like their melta gun is standing out in the open because they thought there was a rattling sniper there. They turn the corner, there's nothing there, and then they get pelted with snipers from everywhere else. Very, very flavorful. Love that. Looks pretty interesting. There's some juice.
Yeah, the battle mud is basically an always take because it means that any of the melee guys trying to do the melee stuff will just get absolutely obliterated because that activation is basically done.
Yeah, it's like that's like as rude as blinding light.
Yeah, because the most important thing is after a charge, you can't dash. So make sure your your ratlings are always in a position where if they get charged, your opponent's gonna be stuck 4 sheets to the wind. And so basically keep every rattling a little bit over an inch away from all pieces of cover if you're in charge range. And then just battle mutt, and your opponent is screwed.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna try at least one game, probably exactly one, because this is not gonna be good. But I think it'd be fun to just bring the leader, 7 snipers, and three free ploys, and just see if you can tiptoe around and just like pick people apart with shooting. And it's like you're battling against a ghost town that's killing you. Is essentially playing against just a bunch of snipers that you can never touch, and they pick you apart. Seems amusing.
Yeah, I'm very excited about the box. It looks actually very amusing, so we're very excited to see where it kind of ends up.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. All right, listeners and YouTube watchers and Patreon people and wherever this is going out, because we never actually know where we're going to put things out. Thanks for coming on, talking, having us yap about Cunning and Brutal. And pick up your box. Thank you, GW, for giving us a review copy. And don't forget to pick up your box at your friendly local game store.
Thanks for listening until the end.